We have a great panel going on here. We're going to be talking about a fantastic tool. It's become very, very popular. And the handout that I handed out, it actually is a trial, a way to get a trial NFR of the plugin, and it also talks about the weekly. Is it weekly, guys? Or
Yeah, weekly.
Weekly. Believe it or not, what plugin company does a weekly seminar? It takes your mixes and
Every Friday.
every Friday, and you go online, and he takes somebody submits a mix, and he goes through it and uses a CQ. It's pretty cool, because I wondered about how to learn this thing and how to read it. This is starting to ring a little bit. So let's introduce our panels, and each will kind of talk about what they do and where they're at. So immediate left, Jason.
Hi.
Hi.
Okay.
Jason LaRocca?
LaRocca. That's all good.
Rockin'. What do you do?
La Rocca if it's Italian, but yeah, same thing. I'm a music producer and film scoring mixer, and work with a lot of composers in town, a lot of young guys, Bear McCreary, Lauren Balfe, a lot of other guys. Mark Isham is kind of where I got my start.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Probably know what you're doing, I think.
No idea.
A little bit. Keep it loose. Tor Legvold. I hope I said that right.
You did.
All right, good. Tell me what you do.
I'm a mastering engineer. So I've run a mastering studio in Norway since 2003. And we were very early into surround and immersive formats. I moved here to America 4.5 years ago. And we had a lot of clients that were involved in film projects or television projects. And they're like, hey, we need someone who understands how this works and understands surround and immersive. Can you help us? And now I'm doing a bunch of post-production as well.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Alfredo, next.
Yeah, so my name is Alfredo Pascal. I'm originally from Mexico, and I've been here for about 8 years. I started in Hans Zimmer's camp, learning everything that I know now from Alan Mayerson and Nathaniel Kunkel, and now I'm mixing scores, a little bit of re-recording too, and basically whatever it's needed to push the job through, a little bit of editing here and there too. So yeah.
Great. And I just met Tom on the end here. Go ahead, Tom.
I'm Tom Marks, re-recording mixer. I live in Los Angeles and work here at Sony. Been in this stage the last 6 weeks. Awesome. We're mixing an animated film.
He's mixing something in this room right now.
Very cool.
So what we have in common is all of these guys use this particular software. I'm sorry I don't have a picture of it on the screen, but you will soon see it when you get the NFR. It's a 90-day, I think, NFR. And also there's deals, special pricing if you decide to go. So we're here to talk about the EQ, which is by Wholegrain Digital. It is called a Digital Dyne PEQ. So what it is, it's a dynamic equalizer, short story, but enables you to tune in certain frequencies and stress them or not. And there's a limiter, and there's all kinds of features in this single plugin. Okay, so what would you use something like this for? Well, let's talk about that. One thing that happens when you are processing multi-track files, especially if they're part of an Atmos set or anything where the outputs, the files interact with each other in space, like a left and right stereo, is that you want to prevent any kind of interaction such that it destroys the stereo imaging to a degree. So this plugin takes care of that common issue. So let's talk about how we use it. Who would like to go first? Tom, you're on the end there. You're it. Tell us how you use this plugin.
Yeah, so I'll use it for both dialogue and music purposes. On the music side, because of the transparent nature of the plugin, whenever you have source material that is good 95% of the time, and then occasionally, like with music, the big ones, brass, whenever they get loud, whenever we're mixing theatrically in here, the whole mix obviously can get really loud with action movies, sci-fi. And when you push the music up, any frequencies that aren't pleasant to the ear will start hurting. So you can use just normal EQ in those instances, but what you'll find is you're pretty much having to ride the EQ quite a bit. It's a lot of extra work. So
Automating the equalizer a lot.
yeah, just chasing the frequencies and the gain, where with the Quartet plugin, you can set that up to where at certain thresholds, when say brass gets really bright, really harsh, it starts kicking in and it does just a set amount of gain reduction to where the music's still loud and powerful and owns the scene, but the music's very pleasant to the ear.
Nice.
So that's probably the biggest thing, because with score, you can't destroy it. You can't harm the melody that can come through the brass or destroy the balance that you're given. You just have to do it in a very clean way that seems like it never was even there.
Awesome. So the equalizer, you can use any of the 4 bands. We're talking about what they call a quartet. So it's 4 bands. You can use them passively, just like a regular EQ, or you can go to active. And there's a lot of other dynamic features within each band. So let's talk about what an extreme one. How about? I'm sorry.
Alfredo, yeah. So what was the question? Sorry.
How do you use it in extreme way, in extreme cases? What
In extreme cases,
you really got like a major bozo, major.
yeah, I think, for example, I'm thinking about mixing multiple string passes, for example, and when you're soloing each one and you're mixing it to your liking, you might be finding yourself boosting the same frequencies on some of the same on different string passes. Right. So once they all funnel through the string stem, for example, instead of having like a static dip, you can just set it up to, for example, the 2.5K range, which is like very hard to the ear sometimes. When there's overlap and it gets out of control, then you can use that dynamic to like really bring it down without having to have a static dip on your whole 2.5K range. So.
Right. I was talking to Alan Meyerson, and he said it's the only product he knows of that you can have overlapping bands, right? So one frequency is, say, brightening a vocal, for example, and another frequency is taking a certain resonance right in the same frequency area. He says it's the only plugin he knows that can do that. So that would be a good tour masters. I'm sure you've come.
You just described exactly. So maybe a mix needs more air, right, or a little bit more presence, a little bit more lift in the top. But the vocalist is maybe a little bit spitty or a little bit harsh, a little bit of sibilance, and so you can't do both. So here you can put a shelf in as a lift everything, and you dial in and find exactly that S frequency, and since this is dynamic, you can then only apply it when it passes a certain threshold. So rather than putting a notch there and removing that S completely, which we don't want to do,
Which is a de-esser.
we just pull it down just when it gets over a certain amount. So it's really cool because it's essentially you're doing all of your dynamics processing in one box, and you can do it as a normal EQ or as a normal compressor. But when you combine those two things, because we're essentially just working with level, right? We're just adjusting the volume. We're turning the volume up with an EQ on a frequency, or up or down based on level in a compressor. And when we put those two things together, you can do pretty much everything you need.
Definitely. I actually came to find out about the plugin through Alan Meyerson.
There you go.
Yeah. So, and I had no idea how to use the thing when I first saw it. I was like,
Same.
this thing is
the interface
daunting.
is a little daunting, but you'll get it, and especially if you show up at his Friday soirees.
It's very cool. Yeah, it's a very cool plugin. And one of the things I find it particularly useful for is on vocal things, since I'm mostly mixing music and score stuff. I really like it on vocals or choirs as sort of my final step on my mastering buses for vocals and choirs.
I have a note about a choir. It was a COVID situation that you could only record 8 of the choir members at a time in separate rooms. That's weird. But
Yeah, that luckily doesn't have to happen anymore. But yes, we were doing it was the trailer for the Dune film, and we were recording the choir. It was actually 4 people at a time, and it took a very long time to get everything done.
How many people in total were in that choir?
It's a good question. We did like 4 layers with about 32 people or something like that. So it took a couple days to do it.
Just curious, were they singing harmonies or just the same notes? Or?
Harmonies, yeah, and ahs and oohs, and then there was lead vocalists, and then groups of people singing lead parts, and yeah, it was a lot of vocals. But when all that stuff gets combined at the end, it's
You find some buildups, I bet.
well,
Same
I get a
singers.
particular ear to mid-range stuff, and I find that if the mid-range is starting to bother me, I want to take things down. But the whole idea with music, especially when it's choir or lead vocals, is you want it to be up and you want it to be loud and sitting there in the front. And I don't like to dip, mid-range and EQ it, just straight up take something out. I think that I feel that it usually feels too phasey and strange. So this plugin is basically what I like for that, finalizing a master choir stem or a lead vocal stem and getting that notch in the mid-range to not peak, not bother my ear, but also be really, really loud. Because we
nail
want
it there and you
loud. That's
keep
the
it there.
idea, is to make it nice and loud and that you really feel it up front. And it's also just fantastic as an EQ, just pushing that top end shelf and just kind of opening it up on from a mastering perspective.
Absolutely.
It's just very smooth and very open. So that's what I always keep it there on my master buses for that.
I'm sold.
It's the truth. There's a lot I don't know about the plugin. These guys know a lot more about it, but I love the way it sounds. It's
There
incredible.
you go. Well, that's the most important thing. Bottom line, how does it sound like?
Well, and I think that's so really, really quickly on that point and on your point, it's super transparent. There's no character or anything. So it's not a vibe piece. There's all sorts of emulations and stuff out there. A lot of different, people are releasing an emulation of an old Neve or this. There's
it has no sound
It's
of
completely
its own, yeah.
transparent. And it is so quick. There are no artifacts, no overshoot. So you can go in and pull something out in a millisecond and boom, and you're out again. And you don't hear it. It's just smooth and nice and everything's right there where you want it.
So we don't have a big image to show you, but each channel, correct me if I'm wrong, it has a 4-band EQ. It has a compressor and a limiter.
And an expander.
And an expander. And also a gate. So you have all those on each band of a 4-band system. So, if you can't get it
Or in
to
America, in America speak, we'd say, but wait, there's more.
sound- and there is.
Well,
Tell me.
it's a powerful plugin. The other cool thing that maybe some people don't care as much now running in native or however you're running your mixes. I still use DSP when I mix, and I mix in EHDX mode, and I like that it has all that power, and I get to run it off of my chips because I've got a lot of native plugins, and so I use this in DSP mode, which I like that balance between what I'm using natively and using this in
I
DSP.
have to because I have an old computer.
Right.
Well, awesome. So let's talk about some other uses. I know that people have put a instance of this on the final pair, whatever that is, and they'll see to find like a problem area, a resonance or a peak or some moment where automating EQ or compressing just not getting it. Once they locate it there, then you could save that preset, I assume, and then move it to the stem. Like Meyerson puts one of these things on every stem. So I don't know how many up to stems he's using these days, but Atmos requires, if you're mixing in Atmos, requires a lot of stems. So that would be a use of it. Anybody got another specific? Go ahead.
Yeah,
Pascal.
so stem mixing, is that the question?
Yeah.
To elaborate on that? Yeah, so we're basically dealing with at least 15 multi-channel stems, 7.1, maybe even 7.1.2. And it's a great plugin, especially if you're using it in DSP mode to free up the CPU for native processing. And just the transparency of it and the limiting stage is just fantastic in your stems. And it's not a huge CPU hog. It does take, I believe Barry said 3% of a chip or so, but it's still pretty good on resource. And considering you're saving other plugins because it has a limiter and dynamic EQ, you can also use the EQ statically. So, you're saving a lot of processing by just using that one plugin.
Yeah, individually it uses a lot, but considering what you're getting on each instance, 4 bands of EQ, 4 compressor, 4 limiters, 4 gates, that's a lot.
Like I said, it's a kitchen sink. So, that will do most of your heavy lifting, in my experience. And then if you need some additional, I need noise reduction, or I need whatever, something else, or a little bit of color or something, that'll come in addition. But I put this almost on every, every
You could
session.
use, they make a trio, they call it a three
There's
band.
a light version, yeah, with
So
three
it's
bands.
a little bit lighter. You could use that on individual tracks, I think is the
I
drill.
use those on dialogue.
Yeah. So, pretty good. We're going to have a question and answer period. I feel like I should just kind of like, yeah.
Can I bring up one thing? I was just thinking, another thing that, from my point of view at least, is that I love discovering new gear and playing with stuff and all of this, but I also know that as a professional in a very high tempo industry, I don't have time always to learn new stuff. So the fact that I could learn quartet once in stereo, doing stereo mastering, and then, oh, I've got a 5.1 project. Oh, I can use the same tool. Rather than I've been using this other plugin, or I have a bunch of hardware outboard that I used to use more often. But my point is that once you learn this tool, it will expand to the bus width you happen to have. It supports, I believe, up to 10 channels. So if I need to do, for example, some very subtle control on a bed, but I don't want to touch the heights, or I don't want to, whatever, I can use this. And it's the same tool, it's the same interface, it's everything, and so I know it. I don't have to go back and relearn something, right? I don't have to buy another plugin and then start learning all of that all over again. I think that's important.
Sure it is, for speed and for getting to know your tools really, really well, and know what they do and what they don't do, and call one up right away and go after what you need to do, because that's what it is. So we've been talking about workflows. So maybe you, like, say, Tom, on the end there, comment on a workflow that you use the plugin that saves time, that gets you through your day, that you kind of like large sessions maybe more efficiently. You do this, and that. I know, like Alan was telling me, Meyerson was telling me that he uses it on every mix, which is pretty remarkable when you think about it. Here's a guy that has anything he wants pretty much, and he's always defaulting, if you will, to that particular EQ. So that says a lot about it. And most of the testimonials I've heard people talk about were kind of in that vein. So tell me what's your secret weapon with this? Which you
Yeah, a good example of it, of the dual band functionality that was brought up earlier, is with production dialogue. It varies all over the place as far as the quality goes, usually towards the bad side. And one really, terrible issue to deal with is when the dialogue was mic'd under several layers of clothing, so it's extremely dull. There's not much top end.
wow.
But at the same time, that actor had a lot of sibilance. So the high end that exists is just a very, very narrow frequency band. So as Jason said, with the high frequency boost on the shelf, it's really clean. It doesn't break up and get brittle. So you can get a lot of gain there to bring up the top end and just get some clarity to the vocal. But if you only had that, the sibilance would be out of control. So you set up a second band with the tight Q. You really have to zero in on where that sibilance is at the time. But you can remove a lot of the sibilance in a clean way and maintain the transparency of the performance that you have, even though it's a limited frequency range you're dealing with.
Jason, you got secret to share?
One of the cool things about it is, we're almost always working in multi-channel sound, and it's a true multi-channel dynamic EQ. This isn't something that you could just throw some other dynamic EQ on a 5.1 or 7.1 bus and get the same effect. This really works that way in a multi-channel mode where you have true, dynamic EQ on every channel discretely. And I know Dwayne can, talk more about how it side chains and does all that. But for me, that's just one of those things where, like, I like to get the vocals really loud, especially like on Lord of the Rings. There's a lot of choir stuff where it's like things are really out in front. There's a lot of and sibilance was some issues sometimes too, where they're singing very quietly, but we need to bring that level up, control the sibilance. But then, once I get things loud, I tend to feel like the mid range is kind of in my way. So that's one of those things I like to always just kind of like nip it in the butt. dynamically with some EQ. So I don't know. That's one of the things I really like it for is multi-channel. You know,
And that means that if you put say you put a 10 across your Atmos.
yeah, usually 5 channels, 6 channels for me, but yeah,
Yeah.
up to
not the
7.1 or
not the
7.12.
LFE or something, but
Yeah.
but they interact. So it's kind of like a stereo compressor where the left and right are linked.
Right.
This is linked to all the channels you put it on.
Right.
So you don't get a problem with one channel peaking
And collapsing and getting that sound to sort of feel like it's now just in the center and becoming sort of mono.
I really don't know of any other product that has 10 channels.
Right.
Soon to be 16, by the way, in the update.
Right.
So that's kind of important.
So that's something that's really unique about it that makes it, especially for me, because I'm usually almost always working multi-channel modes and mixing music, that it's really works discreetly and perfect for that kind of a job, which I don't know of another plugin that does it.
And I think that connected to that, you can decide yourself how you want to split that up. So maybe I want to just do the main layer and leave the heights alone, or maybe I want to just do LCR and leave the rest, untouched, whatever, for certain things, or I want to set those up separately so that they're interacting, but they're separate instances, and that's also possible with the plugin.
That's cool. I didn't know that.
What do you just unlink those particular channels?
Put in separate sections, or you put them on different stems.
Oh.
Split the stems, or
Okay.
you can just put in separate instances.
I can't wait to get out. I told him I told Dwayne I would write a review for a mix if he sent it to me, and I can't wait to try it on a drum kit. I mix pop music, so it's a little different world than you guys, but I can't wait to try it on like a drum kit, for example. Everything but maybe the kick or something like that. Just get wacky.
No, it's great. It's great on drums too. Controlling the cymbals and expanding the kick and the snare and getting if like sometimes you've only got an overhead or a stereo drum track and you can actually do quite a bit with it to accentuate the kick, accentuate the snare drum,
I'm
tame
always
the
the guy
cymbals.
that gets to like, who recorded this? And totally like a drummer that knows where the cymbals are, and you know what I'm talking about. These guys are all shaking their head.
And
Yeah,
if
I've
you
been there.
get a lot of cymbal splash and things start getting really kind of harsh, it's nice because you can find the EQ area where that's happening, and just bring that down. So you just tuck it in, so it's still there, but you can adjust how much, how badly it's sticking out, how much it's, and even it out, and you can decide. You can let it, if you want it to breathe a little bit and to be a little bit rough and ready. It's a punk song or whatever, that's fine. If you want it very even and it's everything's got to be pristine, you can do that too. And yeah.
Awesome.
Pristine or mean?
Yeah.
Pristine or mean, huh?
Dwayne can have that. You can use that as his.
He was out in the hallway for a minute.
Did you hear that, Dwayne?
Dwayne is the designer, owner, and kind of the brains behind all this. Okay, let's go with some other uses. Talk about specific instruments when you're mixing music. We talked about drums already, but let's talk about some. I want to say string section, maybe, but more like pianos, grand pianos, or maybe 3 or 4 keyboards that somebody has got all playing together. That is always usually a mid-range mess, usually because they're all in the same register pretty much, and you want to be able to separate them out a little bit. You're shaking your head. Go ahead.
Yeah, no. So on pianos, that would be a great example. To control transients sometimes depending on the sound that you're going for. But what I like the most is that you can boost the high frequencies, like my colleagues have mentioned, and also apply dynamics to it. So it gives you like a tightness to that sound, and also helps control the transients if that's what you're going for as well. Of course, you can also maybe get more transients out of it. If you tweak the attack and the release, because each band you can actually tweak the attack release times of each dynamic processing. So yeah, that would be one of the uses for piano.
Would you say it's always a time saver? Almost always.
Absolutely.
When you use it.
Yeah.
If you were
Processing and time saving.
What?
Once you learn the interface.
Okay. So
Steep curve.
Definitely.
So yeah, I mean, it's a time saver in that it gets you sonically better results to the, the end of where you're trying to go with a lot faster. I mean, it's easier to get a great sound with this, at least for me. I'm by the time I'm using this plugin, I'm usually at the mastering stage or the finalizing stage of what I'm treating. And it's like I can grab a lot of different EQs or a lot of different dynamic EQs, but the speed of what this does, of course, once you learn it, yes, like you guys are saying, but what it does, I feel, does it faster than other plugins I've used in the past.
I agree. And there are a few tools in the plugin itself that are pretty helpful, among others, the solo and the sidechain solo.
Oh yeah, he was showing me that out, and he's right outside here. His table, if you want to sit with the.
So you click on a button essentially, and you hear the sidechain. So you can then, it will let you then just adjust
Sit
cue
with
and the
Dwayne
bandwidth.
right
and
out here in
boom,
front.
there's my sibilance.
show
Boom,
you
there's
that,
the bass
yeah.
wolf tone. Boom, there's the piano resonance. Boom, there's the dialogue, whatever's going on, and you got it. And you adjust it to tweak, and then you click it off. Put in your how much you want it to affect it, what levels, and you're good. And that's it. And there's a preset manager. So once you do that, like for sibilance and stuff, in mastering that comes up all the time. So I just put a preset, heavy sibilance, light sibilance,
Does it
female,
come? Does
male.
it come with a collection of presets?
It does. It does.
A tool chest.
And they're
Tool
good.
chest. Yeah, absolutely.
Tool chest.
A tool chest. It's
Really?
hidden pirate treasure. Speak like the pirate was last week, but
Wow. Presets are pretty important in plugins when you're first starting to use them. Usually they're way too strong generally, but get in there and say, okay, this is how that happened. All right, let me turn that part down. Let me turn that part up. That's what you do. So
useful starting points.
yeah.
And conversely to what Tom was saying too, he was saying, giving some examples of how he would use it in extreme cases when things are problems. Yeah. But, there's also a lot of cases where we get things that sound incredible and get to work with some pretty fantastic recordings.
These guys have, film. I can't imagine what happens to the sound in the process of making a motion picture.
Yeah,
I mean, whereas I get
Tom's a
stuff
genius.
recorded in studios, usually by pretty good guys and pretty good musicians, pretty good studios, pretty good instruments. So it's not often I get disaster stuff, but you guys must get like the dregs of recording, off mic dialogue, you name
Sure.
it.
Sure.
I want to be really, really thankful to all of the production sound editors out there that I know.
For real.
I think they do a great job, and sometimes we get stuff in that just, this is great. Little touch here and there, but a lot of times there's like, wait a minute, did someone forget that the lav is under a jacket, under a shirt, under a...
And that's all the only shot they got at the
only
dialogue.
shot.
That's it.
And to that end, when it sounds fantastic, I'm always thinking to myself, well, how can we make it sound just a little bit better? What's that thing we can just put on the end of it that gives it that sort of like, the je ne sais quoi thing or whatever. And
Shine.
to me, that's what I'm hoping I'm using it for a lot of the time. It's just a little bit of touch, a little bit of something here that's giving it that little bit of extra openness in the top and a little bit of tightness in the bottom, and it just does that thing that nothing else does. When something sounds fantastic, it sounds that much better.
Totally agree. It's the goosebumps. We're looking for the
The
goosebumps.
goosebumps. The goosebumps.
So to a person who just got this, a beginner, let's call this person that just got it, what would you tell them? You're not going to go do the session for them or sit next to them, but what would you tell them when they got this plugin that they should try to do? Go to the Friday things?
Absolutely, go to the Friday event. And
They're on
try
that.
to
By the
learn.
way, that handout has that schedule of those on there if you want to see when it is. And yeah, so the Friday event, what else? Anything else? Is there a manual?
Just press all the buttons and squeeze all the knobs and see how it sounds. That's how I usually learn things, but definitely some very technical stuff in this one.
Yeah, for me, I found that so the mastering system that I've used traditionally came with it. It was bundled, and I pulled it up many times in a session, and I was just like, I don't have time for this, or I couldn't get it to do what I wanted it to do. I'm just like, okay, whatever. And right after I moved here, Dwayne invited me to a panel or a program at Paramount with Nathaniel and Alan and a few others. And I'm like, hey, I know you, and they walked us through it. I'm like, oh, and all the light bulbs went off. And after that, I've used it on every session. It's just like, and the more you use it, the easier it becomes. And I would go to the website. He's got videos, tutorial videos. Look at some of those. When you watch someone else working, it's like, oh, that's how that's connected. That's how that works. Okay. And also just push everything and see what happens. Totally agree.
Well, the sidechain monitoring is like a must. For each section, you can hear exactly what that section is working on, and of course adjust it if you need to, and you can really see, and then you can put it back.
Oh, sorry.
Yes, right.
I like to talk. So one thing to remember is that each band is individually controllable. So if I want a wide band, full range, one of those bands to be full range, I can. I can use it as a regular traditional compressor all the way across. I don't have to do just a frequency limited band. I can do broad, and then the others I can use for more specific things. That's also something that's kind of cool.
Yeah, just a single band can literally be anything you want.
Yeah.
And then the next band can be anything you want. So you could have 4 full band compressors in the plugin if you want, with different ratios and thresholds, attack release times. So I would say patience is pretty important with this, but give it a chance and really play around.
Awesome. I'm going to open it up to questions. We'll talk some more, but if there's some questions somebody would like to know, I know we don't have an image of the thing up there, but if there's something that somebody would like to ask right now, we'll take a break. Yeah, back in the back.
Give him
Hang
a
on,
mic. Give him
hang
a
on.
mic so we can hear him.
Hang on, we got you. It's a professional studio here, you know.
Thank you. Yeah, I haven't used the plugin, but I'm imagining since it's so flexible, you can also change the order of each process on each band, or is that not the case? Like EQ first, compression limiting, or change that order?
So well, do you want me to answer? The thing is that the way the EQ and the compressor, or the dynamics section, to call it that, interact is set up by Dwayne. So that's in the plugin. That's defined, and that's one of the powers, or one of the things that makes it so powerful. So you can't switch the order of the processing around. It's not like some of these effects where you have like a chain built into one GUI. Right. It's actually the different parts are interacting with each other, and obviously the limiter part is at the end because of course, yeah. But otherwise, yeah. But the way it's set up, I think when you play with it and try it out, you'll see, oh, it has to be this way, because otherwise I wouldn't have the power and the flexibility to do all the things that it
You're
does.
sort of changing the DNA of the audio stream in a way. You really are. I mean, I know what you're talking about. Maybe a compressor and then a EQ and then a compressor or something. You know, I always thought you want to shape it before you squash it. So, those rules don't apply in this plugin. That's kind of why it sounds the way it sounds. Anybody else got something?
Well, having said that, though, you can overlap what certain bands do.
Yeah.
So you can, they interact in various ways.
And that's
depending
kind
on
of
how
why you can do that. You could have a notch, and at the same frequency or adjacent, you could have a shelf. So that's kind of back here.
Yeah, I was just going to say that. Oh, thanks. That I haven't used this particular device, this plugin, but I do a lot of live sound mixing, and I also do some Pro Tools post mixing at home on my DAW. But the thing that's so great about a dynamic EQ is that, for instance, with an overdrive guitar, which could be a very important part of a music piece, there are many times in the past where I get the sound that I want out of the guitar for the most part, but there's like several sections in the whole tune where the tonal characteristic is just awful. It's just, because of the processing, it's just not nice. So this dynamic parametric EQ just sits there, and when you find that offensive area, and when that occurs, it goes and just ducks it in there, and you're good.
That's right.
So you're shaping the sound exactly the way you want it to be, but then you're tailoring it to that one specific characteristics that's not particularly musical or whatever. And I also use on the Midas Pro 2, there's a 4-band multi dynamic EQ that is, I don't know, it's probably designed in 12 years, 15 years ago or something like that, but I use it a lot. And I'll just throw it on something when I don't know what's coming. And in real time, I'm just searching around and I find the offensive thing, and then I just leave it. And then it's on my main bus. So anything that pops up, it just handles that. But it leaves everything else alone, which is great. So it really isn't an EQ, and it's not a compressor. It's a third thing, which is fantastic.
Love that.
I think you got it. I think you get it. Yeah.
Good. Yeah, right here. Just throw the mic at her. No.
Let's not get her.
Thank you. This question is for Tom. I know you do Atmos and 5.1 and 7.1 and multi-level formats. Is this something that you would use for a down mix on a stereo? And how, if so?
I actually don't remember if I have used it for down mix purposes. As far as bus wise, I do use it, and it's got a really amazing limiter built in that's very transparent. You keep hearing me say that with this plugin, but I can't say it enough. Really, it's what this excels at. So to be able to put it on a bus and get the level you need and not do any harm to the mix that you have, but get the level up is another point we haven't really got into much here. But I would say it's on big sci-fi shows that I've done where you are pushing a lot of sound design and music, and you have to get every bit out of the music. For me personally, when I'm mixing it, the limiter is better than anything.
I hear that a lot. Nathaniel Kunkel's big on the limiter, very loves it. Super fast, talking about that. You guys have mentioned that. Super fast, super transparent, kind of does what it needs to do and gets out of the way. And
it acts like an analog peak limiter, so it actually is listening to the intersample peaks. So it makes sure that your project's compliant and within full scale digital full scale.
yeah, you can set a peak limit, and it's pretty accurate.
Incredible.
I mean, it will. Dwayne was talking about he's yet to get somebody rejected from Apple tunes for an over, for overs. So if you set that LUFS number,
Yeah.
that's what you're going to get.
Exactly. And if I'm not Tom, but if I could, I do. I mean, I have done a lot. Stereo mastering is where I kind of started. In the stereo image or in the stereo system, typically you have a lot less space because you can't spread things out spatially. So it's actually, I find, more useful, even more applicable in that situation than it would be in surround and immersive.
Yeah, the other thing with the limiter is the speed. A lot of dynamics processors, when you really crank up, or I guess lower the attack time, you can very easily get distortion. So with a lot of the instances we're all talking about with mastering, you can't make the mix worse than what you were given.
Do no harm.
And the same thing with all of us. Otherwise, the clients would probably find somebody else. So the speed that you can adjust the attack times to and not have the consequences like other plugins or anything on the analog side is really helpful.
In the back, I think you were first in the back. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Karma Auger from Studio One LA in Venice. We're an Atmos studio, and so I just wanted to confirm the plugin does come in a multi-mono format where you can change all the settings for each individual channel.
To the best of my knowledge, it does. Although I don't think Dwayne would call it multi-mono. I think it's just, it is made for that format.
Sorry, that's how Pro Tools calls it.
Right,
so-
right.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I too haven't seen the plugin. Haven't seen its interface, so I can't. Usually if you see it, you can kind of get an idea of what you use it for. But like a lot of people, I'm a big fan of Pro Q3, and I've used a lot of the dynamic EQ in Pro Q3, and I use it almost on a daily basis. So I'm wondering, does this have something that kind of sets it apart from that? Just because it's such a common plugin, so many people use it and are familiar with it. And is this something that you would use maybe in a different situation than something like that, or would you kind of use it in place of?
These guys are going to have a really good answer, but one quick thing I will answer for you on that is that the plugin does work specifically in 5.1 differently than the Pro Q3 would work, because the way that is sidechaining is sort of like the multi-mono thing that you were describing. It's not actually designed to work in a 5.1, 7.1 or above format, which this plugin does do. So You guys could probably say more beyond that, but that is one specific difference between those two plugins.
You also get specific adjustments per band. So in Pro Q3, I don't think you can change the attack and release time of each band. So in this one, you can actually tailor that for each band.
Yeah, and also with Pro Q3, I do use it often more for utility type work, general purpose stuff. You can't do full frequency compression with that. It's a super slick plugin. The GUI's one of the best out there. Ease of use, and I think you get up to 24 bands in it. Where this is definitely, you have an issue, you want the best product possible, that's where I go to Quartet.
Awesome. Okay. Let me look at my notes. You guys want to add anything while I'm trying to think about it? Nothing?
I mean,
There's a free demo. Try it out.
90-day demo, right?
Yeah, I mean, you
That's-
have
can't-
that,
can't
that
really
sheet
beat
has
that.
the
That's pretty
90-day
cool.
demo. If you did not get one, you might be able to go out to the table outside Dwayne's table, and he might have more of those. But the demo is really a way to do it. Just get the thing and try it out. And it uses some CPU. Won't kid you, but look what it's doing. My God, I mean, there's also
Yeah,
the
but you can
trio.
run-
And it's often on the stems. So
Yeah, the
Right.
trio. Yeah, everyone's been using it on stems. If you do a lot of stems, they put them on the stems, one on each stem.
Yeah, from a music mixing perspective, if you're doing, 25.1 stems as your music delivery, you can run one of these on all of those stems as your mastering EQ, dynamic EQ, and not have, I run an HDX3 and I don't have any issues doing that. And that kind of answers your question too. You asked about the stereo, using it as a stereo limiter and dynamic EQ. Because we're usually using it on all of the stems, we aren't using it on the stereo bus just because we're using it already on all of the individual stems, basically.
And from a native perspective, I use Fairlight, so I'm the odd man out here. But I run it on
that?
I know. But I run it on a Mac Pro, so a multi-core, with gobs of RAM and everything, and it never breaks a sweat. So I can just keep adding for days. So, and I'm sure it's the same on Pro Tools on a card.
True that.
Anything else from the audience right now? All right, maybe we'll generate some more. We're looking at pretty good timing here. I don't know when we're supposed to end. Do you guys know? I don't know. I don't care. Three.
We could just keep going.
Yeah, just keep going.
I get
You
some
guys
bad
don't
jokes.
mind. You probably already ate. Everyone had something to eat, I'm sure. Yeah, cool. Let's keep going. When you are, let's say you're working on a feature, maybe. When do you start the EQ process? Go ahead.
Step one.
Step one.
Dialogue editing with Trio.
Yeah, for me, mixing wise, when I first start mixing, it's dialogue pre-dub, and as long as the level's there. So I guess technically step two, because you can't EQ if something's not at the right level. If it's too quiet or too loud, you're not listening. To me, I can't listen quietly and EQ the same. Whereas, monitoring, we mix at 85 dB. I want to listen at that level. So if a line of dialogue is really quiet, I'll clip gain it up, and then at that point, that's where I start EQing.
Makes sense to me. Makes sense. Total sense.
You said it so much more elegantly than I did.
And you would use the trio version usually, or?
Honestly, never used Trio. Ever since I first started using the plugin, it's always been Quartet for me.
Okay. What else can you do at that time? Anything like fix a problem with dialogue at that point?
In the dialogue pre-dub process, it's all about fixing problems, because ultimately when you finish your dialogue, think of it as pre-mixing. So it's about a day per reel is an average. When you finish that and before you start final mix, you want the dialogue to be ready to go. So when you enter the final mix, you can think big picture, you can think music. You're going to be having clients, directors, producers, picture editors, on the stage with you. So you have to think of the movie as a whole and not specifically what's wrong with this line of dialogue at this moment in time. So the pre-dub process is really about solving all those problems and getting the technical side of it out of the way.
I'm in the middle of that process right now on a feature documentary, and trio is, so a lot of it is just gain, cleanup, noise reduction, other stuff. But when there's a resonance, when there's something going on, and it's like this just doesn't fit, it doesn't work.
You said
Trio
noise
comes in.
reduction. What did you mean? When you-
Background noise, or if I got to RX something, that's something else. This doesn't do noise reduction. But if there are issues with either the boom or the lav or whatever, or there's a resonance or cavity or something going on, I can throw a trio on it and boom, 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 and we're done, so that we're ready for the pre-dub when we do that, when we get to that point.
Great. And what about, okay, let's move on to music stems.
I mean,
does that work?
typically, I wouldn't start EQing as my first thing. I would try and, first of all, just play the thing back and see what it sounds like and see where, what the problem areas are of something, and do what I can. I like to do what I can with faders and just sort of start to massage the thing to a place where I feel like it's starting to become more and more manageable. Just
So
because
not too much clip gain.
I mean, I might do individual things just to start off. I might put a little bit of a notch EQ on something if I solo it up, but I try not to solo too much up when I'm listening, and try and get a little bit more of like what's the big picture here, get that kind of a concept, and then maybe hone in on specific things musically, and then sort of back out from it again. But the Dyne PQ is more something I look at as my kind of like, I've done all my surgical EQs, I've done all my specific problem solving things, and this is more to kind of give it that extra, now everything's homogenizing and coming together and sounding like one cohesive sound for me.
Hence the reason why a lot of people are using it on stems. Right. So it's like a mastering, if you will, a mastering tool for a stem. So,
Yeah, it works really well for what you're talking about if you set it to a low ratio but a high threshold or low threshold. Right?
it's just going to it's going to put a cap on the dynamic slightly, a little bit.
Yeah, you can really be transparent once again with it, where it just kind of adds this glue to the mix, brings up, with gain, you'll bring up the lower elements, just contain a little bit the elements that start getting a bit bigger, but just does it in a very pleasant way. I would say for me, in an old Neve style compressor way.
Yeah, let's talk about dynamics. So the limiter, I hear everybody talking about this analog sounding limiter. Yeah?
Yeah, I use the limiter for peaks. So I'll do a combination of wideband compression with it, the low ratio. I would say even most instances are less than 2-to-1 ratio. And then additionally use the limiter just to make sure any peaks don't get by, depending on the
So
spec.
you have both a compressor and a limiter on each?
Well,
band?
the limiter is we don't have a picture up, but the limiter is down at the bottom of the plugin in the
Final
GUI.
stage of the output.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you have your 4 bands, and then the output of that entire has a limiter.
Yeah, I'll set one band as a full frequency compressor at the low ratio, and then also use the limiter at the bottom as a final stage.
It's like a safety.
Yep, exactly.
You can tell I know the plugin really well.
Well, and
Now you
before we came down here, we were having a discussion, and we also talked about, apropos finishing and stems and things is, you listen to the whole mix and you're getting a really good feeling, and things are coming together. And there's a few sections where, the dialogue kind of disappears in the music and the effects and all the other stuff going on. And you can then find that area and just put it on that stem so that it's functioning as a ducker essentially, but just for those areas, unless you want, unless you're doing Interstellar and you want the dialogue to disappear in the rest of the mix. Sorry, that was a joke, by the way.
Awesome. Well, thanks, guys. We're at 1:30 almost. Any more questions from the audience? We still have time. It's just, I think they want the room pretty soon. But is there anything else anybody would like to come up with? If you didn't get that sheet that got passed around, maybe go out to Dwayne's table right outside, and he'll probably have some more of them and other things. So thanks for coming, and we enjoyed doing it. I think you guys Cool.
Thanks for having us.
Thank
you
Thanks for
guys.
coming.
Enjoy the rest of the day.